With a question that I want you to consider. It's a question that when I ask it, um, it's going to be one that you try not to think of, but for the purposes of our time together today, I just want you to consider. And that is, when is the last time that you felt alone? Not just a little lonely, but really, truly alone. Now, often, as I said to you, we try not to get in touch with that feeling. In fact, most of us do everything we can to avoid those feelings. But for the purpose of being able to connect with the larger text this morning and to make some application, I'm going to invite you to summon to your mind that place, and it might be very fresh for you, but that place and that time where you felt just totally and completely alone. For me, the last time that I felt this profound sense of aloneness was a little less than a year ago. It began on Friday evening, April 24th, where I shortly after dinner started to experience some really sharp pains in my stomach. Initially, I took some Pepto and I just hoped that the feelings would pass. But as the night went on, they only got worse. At first I thought maybe it was gas, and then I thought, well, maybe it was food poisoning, maybe it was something that I ate, but the intensity of the pain only increased. I laid down after taking some pain meds and went to bed hoping that I could sleep, and when I woke up that the feelings would be over. But as I tossed and turned, unable to find rest, somewhere around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up Katinka and I asked her to drive me to the emergency room. I knew that it was worse than what I had initially thought. Now, because COVID was raging at the time, I knew that when she took me that she was going to have to drop me at the entrance. I knew that she wasn't going to be able to go in with me. It was such a lonely moment as I was doubled over in pain trying to get into the ER, knowing that she wouldn't be with me. Now, I'm not going to give you a play by play of all the tests that they ran that night or in the days to come, but sometime in the early Saturday morning hours, they loaded me up with morphine because I was writhing in pain and I just couldn't take it. The next 24 to 48 hours were kind of fuzzy with my morphine haze. Because Katinka had tested positive for COVID in late March, they put me in isolation, and they only came by my room when it was absolutely necessary. And when they did, it was in their full hazmat suits. It was very scary, like something sort of out of a science fiction movie. Now, I know that they did the best that they could, but at that time, there was a lot of ignorance as to what was going on. And I was totally isolated. I felt completely alone, much like I would envision lepers back in the day when they were um, pushed off to the margins of society and left to be alone. On Sunday, they put an NG tube in my nose, which ran down my throat, my esophagus, and into my stomach. The idea was that they would hopefully remove whatever it was that had been obstructing my small intestine and causing me such pain. What added to the great discomfort of the feelings that I had was that I had had the hiccups for 6 days, 3 of those days for 24 hours, the complete day, like there was no rest from it. So every time that I hiccuped, the NG tube went back and forth, slicing my head. It felt like it was just cutting my brain. It was such intense pain. It was beyond what I can really describe. It was the worst pain of my life. They were very dark days. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't drink. I couldn't see my family. No one had any idea what was going on. The doctors initially gave me 4 or 5 possible outcomes, all of which were pretty grim. I was at the end of my rope. I felt absolutely and completely alone. As I summon those thoughts, I can still feel it. When's the last time that you were alone? When's the last time that you felt the intensity of that pain? Perhaps after a deep loss, perhaps after just an ongoing life situation where things aren't working out the way that you had hoped that they would. Whatever the case may be, I want you to tap into those feelings, because we're going to join Jesus in just a few moments in his aloneness in the garden. And in order for there to be practical application for your story and his story to match, you have to get in touch with those feelings. So I invite you to do that, as hard as it may be. And just before Rick shares with us this passage, which comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 26, I just want to tell you that where we find ourselves is that Jesus's final moments are at hand. He has predicted his betrayal. The plan has been set in motion. He and his friends have shared one final meal, and they have sung a song together and are now headed to a very familiar place called the Garden of Gethsemane to pray. This spot is just outside the city, across the Kidron Valley, about 1.5 miles up the Mount of Olives. And as they make their way there, Jesus will have a discussion with his closest friends, of which Rick is going to now read about. So Rick, if you would do that, please.
Morning, Grace. I'm here to read Matthew 26, and it's just I just want to say it's a pleasure to be here under better circumstances than the last time you saw me. All righty, verse 31. On the way, Jesus told them, "Tonight, all of you will desert me. For the scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I've been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples vowed the same. Then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away, unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep, have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here."
Thank you, Rick. Tonight, all of you will desert me. All of you. Every last one of you. You will betray me. You will deny me. You will abandon me when I need you the most. But Jesus' friends, they can't conceive of this. They can't accept it. In fact, they actively resist the notion. They protest. "No, not me. Maybe him, maybe them, but not me. Never will I do this." But despite all of their protests, the facts won't change. It's about to go down. Jesus is surrounded by his friends that he has loved, but he is totally alone. I want you to sit with the fact that sometimes we can find ourselves in a room full of people, even people that we love and who have loved us, and still feel completely alone. It happens to the best of us. Like me, you could be by yourself in a hospital room, or like Jesus in a garden, you could be surrounded by those you love. Once the feeling descends, there's no escaping it. Now, by the time that they reach the garden, it is late. His disciples are exhausted, they're confused. And as they move to the entrance of this garden place where he will pray, he tells 8 of them, just sit here and rest. But he takes 3 of them with him, his closest of the 12, Peter, James, and John. They walk a little bit further along. And as he does, Jesus just begins to break down. He tells them, my soul, it's just crushed with grief to the point where I just want to die. They have never, so far as we know, ever seen him like this. And to be quite honest, they don't know what to do. What would you do with the Son of God if he is falling apart on you? Panic attack, anxious, knowing what's in front of him, but just not being able to bear what he has to walk towards. The word Jesus uses for soul here can be translated either as breath or life. It's the same word, suke, that he used when he promised his disciples that if they would lose their soul for his sake, that they would find it. So, if what he said to them about losing in order to find and dying in order to live was really true, then Jesus was about to find his life, his soul, his breath. Just before he goes a little further into the darkness of the garden, he asks, rather he begs his closest friends to stay awake with him, to keep watch with him. It's a simple request from a broken and desperate man. Just don't leave me. Please, don't leave me. I need you. Wait with me. Watch with me. And then he goes a little bit further and does a face plant to the ground. His pain is real. His struggle is genuine. He sees what is coming and he just can't bear the thought of it. And so he prays, my Father, if it is possible, please let this cup of suffering be taken from me. Death on a cross was death by prolonged torture. The piercing of his hands and feet with nails, the exposure of his naked body to the burning sun, the humiliation of those who would walk by and scorn him and mock him and spit at him and laugh, the near impossible strain of lifting his collapsed body just to take another breath, his physical frame becoming weaker by the moment, his mind becoming delirious. It was excruciating what was in front of him. As well, it was intended to be. Crucifixion was designed to be an intentional slow death that a condemned person might experience the maximum amount of agony so that those who watched would learn never to rebel against the empire. Jesus knew crucifixion was just ahead. And if at all possible, he wants out. And so he prays the make it go away prayer. This is a prayer that all of us have prayed. Oh God, make this sadness go away. Make this depression lift. God, make this craving, this addiction, this need to fill in the blank, whatever it is, go away. Lord, make this disease go away. If you live long enough, you'll pray this prayer. It's the most natural thing to do when you've exhausted all of your other options. Please let this cup of suffering be taken from me. I prayed that prayer in that hospital room for days. For days, I couldn't really get much to my mind to cogently think through the kind of prayers that I may normally pray. My only prayer for 2 or 3 days was, help me, help me. And that was it. Now, I don't know how long it is between the words that Jesus uttered on the front end of this prayer and the next ones that followed. Maybe it's seconds, maybe it's minutes, maybe it's longer. But what he follows with the make it go away prayer is the prayer of indifference to anything other than the will of God. You ever prayed this one and meant it? He prays, "Yet not my will, but yours be done." This prayer is graduate level. This prayer is a willingness to let go of what it is that you most desperately want, trusting that God's will for your life, whatever it may be, is even better than what you can conceive of. One of the hardest things to decide when you hit a dark night of your soul is whether or not to keep pleading for a certain outcome or to surrender to the will of God. Really, the choice in that space comes down to what it is that
what you are experiencing is truth
God's character, about God's
and knowledge in the place.
And if you believe that you can trust him and him alone, regardless of your outcome. Every dark night of the soul involves wrestling with belief. You can't wait until you get to the dark night to figure that stuff out. If you do, it will be too late. And so Jesus wrestles. He prays the make it go away prayer. And then with whatever time passes in between, he surrenders to the will of God. The problem with our resistance is that is really what causes our suffering. It's when we're unwilling or unable to let go of having things work out the way that we want them to. Peace comes when, from an honest expression of our hearts, we are able to surrender to God. And that's what Jesus does in this moment. And then he gets up, he walks around a little bit, he goes back to check on his friends, and he will do this on 3 separate occasions. And every single time that he does, he will find them fast asleep. It only deepens the idea of how alone he is. But not only are his friends asleep, it feels as if his Father is asleep. He prays this prayer, and there's just silence. It's the most impassioned plea that the Son of God has ever made, and he's met with abject silence. There have been times where his Father has shown up, where the heavens have opened up, and the Spirit of God has descended upon Jesus and prayed blessing and favor on him. Would it have been too much to ask for the heavens to open at this moment for a little bit of comfort, for a little bit of blessing? But he searches the skies and he finds nothing but silence. His disciples, his friends, those who he has loved are asleep. And it feels like his Father is too. And in this moment, we learn very clearly that even the Son of God is not exempt from these kinds of places. But how does he respond when he is there? This is an important place for application for us. This is where we learn something from Jesus in the spaces that we least want to be in. How does he handle this space? He doesn't go around the pain. He doesn't get up and go for a walk or engage his disciples in discussion until his betrayer and the legion comes to arrest him and take him into custody. He doesn't numb his pain. He wrestles and struggles and pushes through it. And in so doing, he teaches us how to navigate these spaces that we so often resist. At the heart of the Christian faith is the concept of surrender. You don't start there, but if you take your faith seriously at all, one day you will find yourself in a garden or a hospital room or some other place of desolation. And when you do, if you follow the way of Jesus, if you wrestle and struggle with what you truly believe about God, about who God is, about how God feels about you, about if God really is listening to you when you pray, even if you get nothing but silence. Asking the question, understanding the answer, does God really care about me? Is God's will for my life actually better than the plans and the hopes and the dreams that I've had for my own? Will God take the worst that life has thrown at me? And will he eventually turn it into something really good? These are the places that we most often resist, but they're the places that we most need to engage. These are the things that we have to confront, and nobody can do it for us. It's something that only we can do alone. And so I come back to the initial question I asked you when we started. When's the last time you were really alone? We may not go looking for it, but when we find ourselves in that space, maybe, just maybe, it's the place where we can push through and get to something deeper and richer as it relates to our life and faith. Jesus teaches us how to be honest before God, how to wrestle and struggle and be anxious and afraid. He teaches us about what to do with the feelings of abandonment and betrayal. Jesus could have easily held on to those. I mean, every single one of his closest followers totally sold him out. When he needed them the most, they weren't there. They were asleep. They were gone. And I don't know whether you caught it when Ricky was reading it earlier, but after Jesus tells them, listen, you're all going to basically leave me when I need you the most. But after everything goes down and I'm resurrected, I want you to meet me back in Galilee because I want to be with you again. Your failures, the way that you disappointed me, the ways that you hurt me, I'm not going to let them stand in the way of my relationship with you. He's not hardened in this space. He's not blaming anyone. He's wrestling for a different result. When he gets to the space where he realizes it's not going to happen, he surrenders to the will of his Father because he trusts in the fact that God's nature and his character have been settled. He knows who he is. He knows that he's working on his behalf. And even if he has to go through the middle of a hellish place, that he's going to bring him through. And so he trusts. He relinquishes his need for control. I really think our need for control is what causes much of our suffering. At some point, if you take yourself and your faith seriously, there will come a place where you will have to decide what to do when things don't work out the way you wanted them to. And I think from Jesus, we can learn something that if we apply to our own lives, will deepen and enrich our faith in ways that we can't conceive of. When's the last time you felt alone? And when you did, what was the means by which you tried to solve your problem? Maybe you can learn from Jesus about what to do in the dark night. Because if you live long enough, the dark night is inevitable. It doesn't have to spell the end, though. It can be a catalyst. It can be a portal through which we walk through that liberates us to new beginnings. And so this day, as we watch Jesus and we wait with him in the garden and we learn from him, I really hope that some of the things that we see, we can apply so that our lives can experience the kind of richness and the kind of qualities that Jesus experienced as he moved through this space. As you think about that, let's pray. So often we do everything we can not to deal with the fact that we feel so desperately alone. But because we handle this situation in the ways that we do,